a little stronger and make it actually maybe work better for the folks.
So portability is a good thing for state employees. Defined contribution plan may even be better.
Yeah, Woody, I mean, you know, the VRS is an issue, but I tell you, overall, people in Virginia need to realize that our retirement system is in relatively much better shape than most retirement systems around the country. So I don't think state employees or local employees that are a member of the VRS ought to worry about their pensions. But there is an issue there. And like John just said, I think we need to take an all-of-the-above approach to that issue, which means that, you know, the state needs to contribute more, the employees need to contribute more, we need to tweak the plan a little bit. And, you know, I really do think you don't see defined benefit packages in the private sector anymore. And the reason you don't is because you can't say to a 20, 25, 30-year-old who starts to work with you, okay, in 40 years, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, you know, per month. I mean, the markets just aren't that, you know, my crystal ball doesn't go out, my market crystal ball doesn't go out 40 years. So it's just not good business. And the other thing is you mentioned is portability. I mean, you know, John said people come and go a lot more in their jobs these days. So, you know, they'd like to be able to take their retirement plan with them. And a defined contribution plan would allow for that. So I think as part of our all-of-the-above approach, we are going to have to move, you know, from a defined benefit plan more towards the defined contribution plan, which you see, I mean, almost 100% of the private sector doing these days.
And Delegate Farrell, you run a business. Is a 401k the wave of the future, at least in terms of the Commonwealth?
Well, I think this is one perspective where I can back up what they're saying, especially about portability, because I am of that generation that John was talking about that's coming onto the market. And you know, I'm 28, and a lot of my friends are already on their third or fourth jobs. And not because the other jobs went badly, but because my generation tends to want to explore new opportunities. The market's changing much faster. So portability is a very good thing. I even have had people come into my office to oppose even giving new employees a choice between defined contribution and defined benefit. I don't agree with that. I mean, how can you argue against giving an employee a choice how they want to work their retirement? So I think there's a lot of old archaic thinking in it. It is, as Jimmie said, we are lucky. We are in much better shape, and the governor is proposing making the biggest investment, I think, gentlemen, we've had in quite some time to the system. But it does need some work because, frankly, it's not fully funded. And we have a lot of people that we've made promises to that John spoke to. So we do have to make some reforms, and I think John said it best, not necessarily backwards to the people that have been in the system for a really long time, but you know, people like me, people in my generation who I think would like more flexibility and choice in how they want to plan their retirement for themselves.
Talk to us a little bit about the friendly business environment in the Commonwealth and what steps we need to take in order to continue that.
Well, I think, one, it's a very easy state to do business because I think the laws are simple. It's easy to understand how to conduct business. There's a lot of educated people. There's a very good educated workforce. There's also a lot of private capital in the state. I think Jimmie would agree with me on that. I think we're unique in that a lot of good, successful businessmen have been here, which helps because business education and business intuition and know-how, being around places, can help new businesses grow because there's an appetite for it. I think people are still very hesitant given the federal atmosphere with the uncertainty that hangs over it. And I know Jimmie laughs because I would say that's really what's holding up business more so than anything. Any other real economic data is straight up uncertainty with tax policy, with foreign policy, and with other economic regulatory policy. We can't tell you because they keep passing bills, or we're going to have a 2-month extension. And as Jimmie will know, and John will know, even planning with his partners, you can't. How can you forecast with employees on a 2-month by 2-month basis? You cannot do it. I mean, if I worked in a company like that and I was making those kind of decisions, I would have been fired a long, long time ago.
So uncertainty is the absolute worst thing for business.
I think that's correct, and I would certainly commend Bob McDonnell and his administration. You know, this is his 3rd year. He's been down here with his top priority being jobs and the economy. I had an interesting experience. Had some folks come to see me from one of the companies that launches satellites from Wallops Island. Something I did not know is that the trajectories of all these orbits are much more aligned with Wallops Island than they are with Cape Kennedy. So we've actually got a resource there that has a wonderful opportunity to be expanded. We've just got to, make a little bit of an investment in that area and let that thing grow, but it has wonderful potential. Those are the kind of things I think we ought to be focused on. We've done the tourism industry, and we had Lincoln here, and those are the kind of things I think where you see a tangible return to the economy in Virginia that we really ought to be continuing to look at.
Delegate Massie, talk to me about this overhang from the federal government that I know you have a few opinions about.
I have a little bit of a passion on that. If you're a Virginia business doing business in Virginia, we have to project. We have to project our budgets going forward and project what kind of return on investments we're going to get if we invest capital. The way to grow an economy is you want existing businesses to expand. You want to start new businesses. Both of those take capital investment. And if you're going to make a capital investment, you want to be able to project what your return is going to be on that capital investment. Well, if you're doing business with respect to the state of Virginia, you can make those kind of projections because your taxes are not going up, your regulatory environment's not going up, and your litigation environment's not going up. Matter of fact, probably all three of those things are going to get better. But then when you look up 95 to Washington, D.C., you've got no idea what they're going to do up there. And matter of fact, what they're trying to do is taking everything in the wrong direction. You look up there and you don't know what they're going to do, but they're trying to raise your taxes. The Bush tax cuts are due to expire at the end of this year. The regulatory environment, pick up your paper every day, and the regulatory onslaught from Washington, D.C. across. They're after Gibson guitars, for goodness sake. So the tax environment is going up. The regulatory environment is hostile, and the litigation environment is hostile. You don't know what your health care costs are going to be. You don't know what your labor relationships are going to be. You don't know whether you're going to have cap and trade in placed on you. So you cannot put together a projection. If I invest X number of dollars today to expand my business or start a new business, I can't project. And so I don't invest. And oh, by the way, everything's going against me. So what do? I sit. I don't do anything.
Yeah. And Woody, I hate to piggyback on that
please
again,
go ahead.
But he's so right. In our business, for example, we deal with a lot of boilers and manufacturing of steam, and there are these regulations that the EPA keeps doing that, one, really aren't based on any good scientific data. Some are, but a lot are not. And then we think the deadline, and they're going to put out the ruling in 30 days, and then in 30 days they say, well, we're going to put it off for another 90. Oh, then we're going to put it off another 6 months. Oh, maybe next month. And Jimmie's right. When that happens over and over again, you literally are slaughtering business because they sit and they can't grow, they can't invest, and they can't get financing because people don't want to finance a business where they really, like Jimmie said, they don't have any earthly idea what the income is going to be, what the regulation costs are going to be, and it really affects business more so than any solid regulation that is going to be in place for a long time.
Delegate O'Bannon, you mentioned Medicare, and of course the other overhang is the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. Tell us what the potential impact of that is.
Well, unfortunately, the potential impact is pretty serious. Laudable goals, but a lot of us think it's just not a workable plan and really is not being rolled out in a good fashion. All the pieces of this have been hard to deal with. The very first part of it was what's called high-risk pools. That failed pretty miserably. Fewer than 100 Virginians, I think, by the end of the first year had gotten that. We've seen the long-term care thing. They've just pitched that off the side. They had some deadlines for what they call the essential benefits package, where the federal government was going to decide what was best for everybody. They lost their deadline on that and then pitched it back to the states to do. And we've got this insurance exchange issue, which lies directly at the heart of our state's lawsuit to our Supreme Court. So we've done some preliminary planning on that. I think most of us, a lot of us think that we've done what we need to do. Some 20 states have not even looked at that. And so I think Virginia is in position properly to deal with that when it comes. The reality is that the day that thing starts, which is January 1st, 2014, there'll be some 400,000 people who will go on to Medicaid. And we have a really good system of free clinics. Free clinics aren't even in that bill. So I am hopeful that we'll see some pretty significant changes as this process goes along.
I think
Woody,
go ahead.
At its core, Obamacare is the expansion of a failed third-party payer system. So, in a third-party payer system, when there's no marginal cost, when we walk into our doctor's office, we all spend a lot of time asking our doctors, what are you going to do to us? And we spend a lot, but does anybody ever ask, what's it going to cost? No, because a third party is paying it. And that's why our health care costs have just spiraled and spiraled out of control. Until we get the consumer involved, have an incentive for that consumer, like everything else we consume. When we walk in and buy a computer, we do a lot of analysis on that computer. And then we ask everybody, what's it going to cost? And we shop. And until we get that dynamic back into health care, we are never going to control the cost of health care.
I think that's right. I think one of the things that the bill did not do, essentially at all, was address the issue of why health care costs are more expensive than other things, the cost curve. And unfortunately, that bill really did not address that at all.
And of course, the other thing that's pending yet is what's called the doc fix, I believe, that is a perennial problem. Tell us what that means.
The doc fix is how Medicare pays doctors. And in the 90s, there was a plan to sort of fix the cost and then redistribute the dollars. Trouble is that the population's grown and the dollars have grown. So now that it's another great example of how our federal government has kicked that can down the road to the point now where it's a huge dollar figure that they, again, put off for 2 months to deal with. So it ought to be a part of what really gets done to look at how health care is delivered and change the incentives so that folks can citizens can be more involved in some of those day-to-day decision making. We've got to get folks back in the loop on some of these decisions, and I think we can do that. I think people are smart. They can make their decisions if you give them some good information.
Great. Just a little bit of time to talk about transportation needs in your district. What kinds of things do you see?
Well, I would say that I think in my district is very unique. I'm the outer semicircle of the Western Henrico delegation, and I think it's a mixture of rural and suburban, and I would say even a touch more rural than it is suburban. I think one thing that the rural folks like to talk to me about transportation is they really do worry. The Democrats like to talk about gas tax increases a lot. I really do think that adversely affects the rural areas more so than the suburban because they really just drive further. I mean, a 10-mile drive to them is a mile drive for those of us who live in the suburbs. I think Central Virginia, actually, we're a net contributor. Am I correct? We actually put in more money to the system than we get back, and I want to get more of our dollars back into the region. I think Henrico, and I think these two gentlemen would agree with me, is a great example of how a locality...
Tell them we were out of time. We're going to have to continue this discussion later. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports. And until next time, I'm Woody Evans.